Hi everyone and welcome back to Chess for Charity. In this video, I'm going to show you a cool puzzle that was suggested to me on Discord. So currently it's white to move, and black has two threatening pawns here. Two pawns that are threatening to become queens on A1 and on B1. Very scary looking pair of pawns. Your job is to see if you can figure out whether this is a win for white or a draw for white. So take a minute, see if you can figure it out. Notice that this pawn and this pawn are guarding some key squares, and the same goes for this knight. This knight's guarding g5, this rook is guarding all of these, and of course this king is guarding these two. So maybe that will give you a little bit of hint, but try to see if you can figure it out. Before I show the solution, let me just ask you to subscribe. I've gotten a lot of subscribers, a lot of comments, a lot of likes. That stuff helps me out so much, helps out charity as well. So every little like, every subscriber helps a lot. Okay, let's get started. So the first thing you should notice is that there's some coordination here between the rook and the knight. You have to figure out how to use that coordination. So these pawns are very scary. You're not going to be able to stop them both. And if you make a move like knight g2, trying the idea being to stop these pawns, that's not stopping anything. A1 equals queen. You're not stopping anything. There's no stalemate trick. There's none of that stuff because the king has lots of places to run to. So something like that doesn't really work. Same idea with rook h1. If you ever do this in your own game, remember, you have a pawn that's protected by another pawn. So even if you took this, this is going to be fine. There's no checkmate. You can just run around. There's no perpetual check with the knight. You just keep running around. And as long as you don't get forked, you'll be okay as black. Okay. So what do you do in this first position? Well, there are two moves that you have to kind of see. First move is you have a check here on g3, and you have a check here on h4. You have another check on h6. Those are the checks you want to look at first. So, okay, that check is not a good idea. That's not checkmate. You might go, oh, where does the king go? King can't go anywhere. Hey, you're right. That's true. They can't, except for the square that was being attacked. So that's not a good idea. There is this g3 check, and we'll look at this. And there's another move, which is this knight check. So this might look like a good idea, but then you're kind of letting the king out because this move is scary. Your knight's being attacked. Well, not really. This king is going to come to g4 and attack both of your pieces. So there's a lot going on here. You can't stop this. And if you go back, now that's a fork, and this is going to hurt, right? Okay, so let's go back. Let's see the point here. So if you want to draw this game, you can probably find the mechanism to draw it. And it's a common mechanism. This is actually one of the reasons why I took this puzzle on when it was suggested to me. I thought this is a nice little pattern. So the way this knight and rook are coordinating, rook h4 is a really nice drawing pattern. Do you see what it's going to accomplish? Well, right now, if either of these pawns promote, we'll just show, for example, the a pawn, I can now move my rook back and forth. Because look at the king. The king can't go forward, and it can't go to the side. Because it's cut off. So it can go either to h6 or h5. In either case, look at how this knight is controlling these two squares. So I can just go back and forth. The king can never get here to disturb my rook. So this is just a draw, right? You can just go back and forth all day. The king can never go here, right? Because that's the way knights work. So if you want to draw, you can get a draw, right? That's the point. And you might say, at this position, is there any other move? No. Look, the king has no moves. So it's not like you can get out of this preemptively. Anything works here. It's all a draw. Promote to a rook, promote to a knight, doesn't matter. Well, promote to a queen or a rook, I should say, because that's not going to be much of a difference. Okay, so you have a guaranteed draw if you want it. Is there better? This is a question you have to ask yourself all the time when you're playing chess. I have a good move here. Should I find a move that does more damage? Is there a winning move? Is there a better move? And it's important, especially in longer games, take the time. See if you can figure out those longer variations, those winning moves. Okay. Rook g3 check is the first move in this position, in this puzzle, really. So the king has two squares, h6, h5. Okay, so depending on how you play, you might kind of feel like these are two very similar moves. And they are. I think my kind of intuition would be to run away to h6 because I don't want to get on this square because that's coordinated with the knight and the rook. But let's just say, for example, we went to h5. Here's the key to this puzzle. Here's the whole idea here. This king is a fighting piece. You want this king to participate in the action because this knight covering a lot, this rook is covering a lot. You need this king to jump in on the action. After king h7 or g7, doesn't really matter, you're covering these squares. The knight is covering this square, knight's covering that square, and you're threatening checkmate in one move. Can they stop this? No. No matter what they do next, promote, doesn't matter. That's checkmate. This pattern with the rook and the knight is such an important pattern that you have to know. The rook and the knight can really do some damage together. So is it any different whether I go to h5 or h6? Kind of, not really. So after rook g3, from this position, king h5 is a mate in 2, right? Right here, and then 1, and then 2 is going to be the next move. If I go king h6, is it different? It's only different by one move, but it's the same idea. So king f7 in this position is the best move. This is crazy. Look at the king. Now what am I doing with this move? I'm just kind of taking over squares because I want to move my rook over at some point, which means I need this king to be guarding these squares. Okay, so right now, let's just say, for example, you promote. What's the threat? The threat is to mate you, and that's the whole point. Like I was just saying. Look at the way the knight and the king coordinate on those squares. And of course the rook taking down the whole h-file. So if you're black, you see that. You're not going to just let them mate you. So you say, okay, I'm going to make a run for it. King h5. The idea being that if I go to check you now you play king g4 and you get out. Okay, but now here's the beauty of it. I don't actually go this direction now. And you might say, well, I can't go here either because if I go here, it's just going to be back to h6. Right? So what is the move in this position that will win the game? Do you see it? Only one move that leads to a mate in 2. King g7. Again, look at the fighting piece here, taking all these squares away. The threat now is rook g5, and that's going to be mate. So you do anything, and that's checkmate. Killer. So the moral of the story is there is always a good coordination between the rook and the knight in these open positions. I kind of think it's something that you should extract from this video. That's the key lesson. The other lesson is the king in endgames is a fighting piece. You have to use it. So don't be afraid to bring the king in. I just love this idea. King f7. The king runs. Fine. King g7. You can't stop mate. This king is dominating these f6, g6, and h6 squares. After a promotion, you checkmate the king. Hopefully you learned something there. I think it's a really instructive puzzle. Again, big shout out to the person on Discord who suggested that. Their name is in the description. But that's it for now. Be sure to subscribe. Thank you so much. Bye.